It's been a long week, right? Are you ready to wind down? Why not? It's time for the Wine Time Fridays podcast with Shelley and Phil. Neither are sommeliers, but both have a deep passion for life, each other, and of course, delicious wine. And now, here to talk about this week over a glass of wine is Shelley and Phil. It's wine time!
Hello and welcome to another episode of Wine Time Fridays with Shelley and Phil and another guest. Friday, August 23rd, episode 227. Shelley, happy Friday. It's wine time. Today, okay. I don't know about Shelley. She did really well in school. I not so much. But in 2010, I sat in one of the presentations at the Wine Bloggers Conference. We're here in Walla Walla. And I listened to this person, Kevin Pogue, speak on basic terroir of Washington wines, but he got into the Missoula mudslides, the Missoula floods. What is the correct?
Floods. Not mudslide, floods.
Okay.
Catastrophic outburst floods.
Yeah. About 12, 13, 14,000 years ago, give or take.
Yeah, that's about when they ended. They started about 5,000 or 6,000 years before that.
Oh.
And then there were probably about somewhere between 50 and 100 in total of those floods.
So I told Shelley before we left the hotel today that Kevin's going to be doing all the talking because we're going in. This is so far over our heads, but it is such an integral part of Washington wine. We are in the middle. Well, we're nearing.
We'll find out.
Just wait a minute. What were you going to say?
I said probably affected Idaho a little bit.
I'm guessing so, but we are in week 4 of the Washington Wine Month, number 2. Kevin, would you mind if we open a rosé that you brought and quickly tell a little bit about that, and then
Certainly.
We'll get on with it.
So this rosé, the grapes come primarily from my backyard here right in the middle of Walla Walla. I've got 6 vines, and I let them grow and do whatever they want. They get all the water from my backyard when I water it, and so they've grown to a massive size. The main trunk on some of the vines is 3 or 4 inches in diameter, 60 feet out from the base of the vine. And the longest vine's about 150 feet long.
Wow.
So probably the largest vinifera vines in the state, I would imagine. And I get sometimes as much as a half ton of grapes off my 6 vines. And in some years, they ripen enough that I make red wine with them, but most years, because there's such a huge fruit load on such few vines, I end up making a rosé out of them. And some years that rosé has been spectacular. And I work with a local winemaker so that it's good quality wine. Tried doing it myself a few times, and I found out making wine's not easy. And
we all have heard.
And so I work with a local winemaker. So it's a rosé of Syrah.
What year?
Last year from 2023.
To health, wealth, and abundance, gratitude, romance.
Peace on earth.
Peace on earth.
Yes, absolutely. It's pretty good, huh?
It is very good. Very fruity, but
You were underselling it, weren't you?
A little bit.
Yeah, this is really good. It's very dry. It has got some effervescence to it. I'm getting some effervescence to this.
I'm not getting
Maybe a tiny bit.
Yeah, just a little, but my goodness, this is good. Still ringing on the back of my tongue. So very good. Well done. Not available, you guys. Sorry.
You have to become my good friend.
That's
right. That's it. All goes to friends and family.
Yeah, this is sensational and a perfect way to kind of kick off a little bit about this whole Missoula floods that really make the Washington terroir really one of the most unique terroirs in the world. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's definitely a unique geologic story, and that story laid the foundations for not just viticulture, but all the agriculture of Eastern Washington.
So, tell us what the heck happened.
So, starting the cycle of Missoula floods, a large lobe of ice came down into the Idaho Panhandle and blocked the Clark Fork River near where it enters Lake Pend Oreille today, and the ice thickness rose to about 2,000 feet. This huge block of ice dammed up the river. The river backed up and flooded all the intermontane valleys of western Montana west of the Continental Divide. Montana was under about 600 feet of water. The volume of water was equivalent to 2 modern-day Lake Ontarios.
Oh, boy.
And eventually, when the water got deep enough, ice doesn't make a very good dam because ice floats in water. So when the water got deep enough, it floated the ice dam. The water started to rush out from underneath it, and then it catastrophically eroded the ice dam. It collapsed. And so we're not talking about a dam like when you think of a dam. We're talking about a width of ice in the tens of miles and a thickness of ice of several thousand feet. So this massive block of ice that was blocking the river was catastrophically blown away by the water, and the water rushed across eastern Washington, across Spokane, dumped into a huge lake called Glacial Lake Columbia that was dammed up by another ice lobe, roared down Grand Coulee, spread out across all of eastern Washington. And one of the cool parts of the Missoula floods is it all had to leave eastern Washington by Wallula Gap on the Columbia River, which is about 30 miles west of here. And when the water was moving through Wallula Gap, it was 5 miles wide, 900 feet deep, moving at 50 plus miles an hour.
Wow, that is
for a week.
Geez, it's going to cause some damage.
That's 80 times the current discharge of the Amazon River, or 10 times the combined flow of every river on Earth.
Wow.
So that happened, and because the lake drained, the ice reformed the ice dam, and this cycle repeated itself between 50 and 100 times over 6 or 8, 10,000 years,
Wow.
ending around 12,000 years ago or so. And those floods carved into the landscape, created the channeled scablands of eastern Washington, and most importantly for viticulture, when the floods backed up behind the constriction at Wallula Gap, the water stagnated briefly, dropped its sediment load of silt, which then the wind picked up and blew all over eastern Washington.
Because that's rather light when it dries.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you can imagine most of eastern Washington after a Missoula flood would have been one big vast mud flat. And then the wind would pick up and blow, as it does in eastern Washington, and blew that fine silt-sized sediment off mostly to the north and east, blanketing the landscape and creating the famous Palouse Hills of eastern Washington.
The rolling Palouse Hills, right? Yeah.
And it's basically the foundation of the soils for all of the agriculture of eastern Washington. And that material, wind deposited silt, it's called loess, Loess, which is a German word meaning loose, because it forms steep embankments, but you can dig into it. It's loose, and so it's called loess. And it turns out it's an incredibly productive agricultural medium for a soil because the way it transmits water. And for the case of us, which we have loess in a desert, most people don't realize, but most of eastern Washington is a desert. The loess will dry out, but we can put irrigation water into it, and because we have the mighty Columbia and the Columbia Basin Project, and also deep wells into the underlying basalt, we can use that water to provide exactly the amount of water the grapes need, and the viticulturalist can control the amount of water so there's not too little, not too much, and the grapes are stressed out exactly right to promote the highest quality grapes. So basically the most important thing about the Missoula flood story is that it provided the silt, the wind deposited silt that forms a basis for our agricultural soils.
Shelley, I'm going to need you to chime in on this because I know you have questions. You have to have questions. We both love to get our hands dirty. And just the whole idea of, winemaking starts at farming. Mm-hmm. It ends up in the bottle, but it starts in farming, and then you go down. I have so many questions. Like, was there a glacier that moved through the Idaho Panhandle because Pend Oreille is so deep?
Yes, Pend Oreille is a glacially carved lake. So the farthest south the glaciers advance was just around Spokane. So and then you can draw a line from there, sort of towards Lake Chelan, and a glacier came down the Chelan Valley. The farthest the glaciers moved down the valley of the Columbia River was about 2 or 3 miles south of where the Chelan River comes into the Columbia. And a large lobe came down the Okanagan River and blocked the Columbia and diverted the Columbia down what's called Grand Coulee today. Mm-hmm. And then there was this huge lake formed there that most people don't know about, but it's a big part of the Missoula flood story called Glacial Lake Columbia. It's where Lake Roosevelt is today.
Yeah.
And
we're
that
talking
lake,
about that.
And that lake received massive amounts of silt from the glacial outwash streams coming out of the toes of the glaciers. And so every, for 50 or 100 years it took to fill Glacial Lake Missoula, the Glacial Lake Columbia was receiving silt and more silt mm-hmm. from these glacial outwash rivers. And then when the Missoula floods came out, the floods roared into Glacial Lake Columbia and exhumed all that silt out of the lake,
right,
and carried it downriver. And then when the flood ponded behind Lula Gap, that silt just got spread everywhere. And then the wind spread it even farther.
Right.
So and the interesting thing, a really interesting thing is a lot of people think of soils as being formed from the sort of degradation and weathering of your underlying bedrock mixed with a little organic material. That's not at all the case in Eastern Washington.
In this case. Now that can be the case.
Oh, that's the case in a lot of areas.
Right.
But not so here. Here, our underlying bedrock is basalt, which is lava. Black lava like comes out of the volcanoes in Iceland or Hawaii, but the overlying soil material is derived primarily from erosion of granite. So it's made of quartz and mica, and it's made of minerals that aren't even present in the underlying basalt bedrock. So it's like night and day. So I tell people if a grape manages to put its roots into the loess, it's in one kind of environment, but if the roots go through that and get into the underlying bedrock, it's a whole other world of chemistry.
That is so interesting. So that extra layer of terroir is going to present itself if that grapevine is stressed and looking for water.
Yeah, or in some cases it's never possible because the loess might be 100 feet thick. So no matter how hard the grape's looking, it's not going to find. But in other places, the loess might only be 2, 3, 4 feet thick
because that got blown away quicker than the others.
So, So basically, if you're in an area that was repeatedly flooded, it only has silt from the very last flood. But if you're downwind and above flood level, you got silt every single flood, and it just piled up. So there are places, in the Palouse and even not too far northeast of Walla Walla, where the loess is over 100 feet thick.
And I'm guessing there are places, because I think I remember this, where you can actually see the layers, and they probably would look a little different depending on which flood, because it's all made up a little different. Or is that the case? Is it just like one big?
There's one place you really see the layers and that's in where you're in the area that was back flooded, where the water was impounded behind, and then you get these layers of where the sediment settled out after each flood, and it starts off with the coarse sediment up to the fine sediment. Then you have coarse to fine, and each one of those layers represents an individual flood.
Yeah.
You only see that below an elevation of about 1,200 feet. Above that, all you see is wind deposited because the floods never got that high.
Yeah.
But something most people don't know about is the Missoula floods were just the latest episode of catastrophic outburst floods. There was another one tens of thousands of years ago, probably 60, 80,000 years ago, and another one that was maybe 750,000 years ago. And each one of those also contributed. So you can, if you go into the Palouse, for instance, you can see an old buried soil horizon that was after the first cycle of floods, then another old buried soil horizon that was after the second cycle of Missoula floods. So, and so we have multiple cycles of floods. But the best one, the one we know the most about, because it was the most recent, was the Missoula floods. And we know there's been so much research done on those floods that it's said no one doubts the story. In the
Did they go
community.
into Canada at all? These floods?
No, everything was south. It followed the water flowed, burst out, and went sort of south and west through Spokane, and then it all went down the Columbia River. So at that time of the Missoula floods, Canada, north of Washington and Idaho and Montana, was under a continuous sheet of ice called the Cordilleran ice sheet. And there were tongues of that ice that came down into the Idaho Panhandle, down into the Columbia River Valley, down the Okanagan Valley, and one tongue came down into Puget Sound. And, and so Seattle was under 2,000 feet of ice during that time. And
interesting.
And that tongue stopped at about Chehalis.
That's fascinating.
It's just
We used to go to Drumheller in Alberta and get fossilized oysters.
Oh, yeah.
So I keep wondering, how did salt water get over there?
Well, during the Paleozoic era, and the Mesozoic era, so now we're talking tens of millions or hundreds of millions of years ago, there was a shallow sea there. Sorry about that. Of course, I turned it on so I would hear from you. And
you just sounded like Ross from Friends. The Paleozoic and Mesozoic. That sort of just hit my head.
So yeah, that's geologically what we're talking about with the Missoula floods.
Thank you. Hard to compete with that. Trust me, this episode will be so much easier to edit than the one from a week and a half ago. I think got 14 minutes out of that one.
When we're talking about the Missoula floods in geologic time, we're talking 10, 12,000 years ago. There were probably the first indigenous people were here. Some of them may have witnessed or been, swept away in the Missoula floods. In geologic time, that's that much.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about the fossils that you might find in the Canadian Rockies that's considerably farther back in geology, in tens of millions of years.
Right. And when those floods came through, a series of 50 of them over, what'd you say, 8 to 10,000 years?
Something like that.
Yeah, give or take. What sort of vegetation were they? This poor vegetation is like when St. Helens went, a year or two later, all this new growth and everything, but all this new vegetation comes, and then another flood goes ripping through. What is that vegetation that's getting wiped out?
Well, it was cooler and wetter then, right? Because there were glaciers just to the north. So you have to imagine that the native vegetation here at that time would have probably been like a boreal forest or something, with swampy and a lot greener than it is today. And you can go into the Missoula flood sediments, the different layers for each flood, and you can find skeletons of little rodents and critters that were entombed in their burrows when the next flood came by. Yeah. So you can see that it had been, and there are occasionally people find mammoth and mastodon bones in the flood deposits and stuff. So, you if you were standing just above flood level and watching the floods go by, you would have seen lots of huge icebergs and maybe some carcasses of big Pleistocene mammals, mammoths, things like that floating by. Most geologists say, if you could do one thing, go back in time, one nice thing would be to sit at Wallula Gap just above flood level with a beer and a nice lawn chair, a glass of wine, and watch that come by, which would have been an astounding phenomenon.
Of course, you'd be up on a mountaintop somewhere.
All you would have had to be is above 1,200 feet, and you would have been completely safe.
Wow.
If you're on top of Red Mountain, the wine growing region of Tri-Cities, I think it tops out at about 1,400 feet. So the top 200 feet of Red Mountain was an island in the Missoula floods. You've been completely safe up there on the top of Red Mountain.
You didn't know until you knew.
Well, you would have been very scared when you watched it coming towards you.
Yeah.
And heard the roar.
So any chance of that happening again?
That's a great question.
The way things are trending
figures?
right now, there's less chance of it happening because the climate's warming up. So, what we'd want to be seeing is, the climate cooling down and heading us towards another period of glaciation. But it seems like we're in a very pronounced period of deglaciation right now. So in the geologic future, is there a chance of? Yes, certainly, because the Earth has gone through cycles of cooling and warming over time, but we're definitely in a warming cycle now, and glaciers everywhere are shrinking, not getting any bigger. So.
We were up in Alaska in 2017. We were hoping, we wouldn't have minded seeing some of those glaciers calving,
yeah.
We saw a little bit.
But it just means when that happens,
really want that.
it just means that, there's another chunk of glacier going away. I'm not a geologist, but I feel like our world is very cyclical, and that we might be going through this deglaciation that you said. But to Shelley's question, maybe in another
100,000 years
or something.
Yeah.
Who knows, right?
Yeah.
Because everything's cyclical. And I know that we as humans, we have a responsibility to treat our world as, be good ambassadors to our world. I just don't know how much difference we're making on the whole scheme of things. Am I way off base on that?
I think we're 100% responsible for the rapid increase.
Rapid one.
And the rapid increase in temperatures in the last 40 or 50 years. I mean, everything points to that. It's predictable. You can do the calculations, and the curves match those. There was a guy in the early 1900s in a New Zealand paper said, "Wow, we've started industrializing. We're pumping a lot of CO2 into the atmosphere. If we keep doing this and it accelerates like this, it can't help but warm the planet." This was in like 1915 or something.
Right.
And
100 years later.
So
100 years late. Well, some would argue like 75 or 80 years later, right?
So things are heating up, and I think we're largely responsible for that. And I think we need to. I think what we're doing in terms of converting to electrical power, versus fossil fuel power is a good idea. And fossil fuels, my bottom line is this: the fossils we're mining, oil and gas and coal, can be used for making raw materials like plastics and things like that. But there's a finite amount of them, and I could see people 200 or 300 years from now looking back and saying,
"Those bastards!
They just burned it. They just burned it. They just took it and burned it. Why did they burn it? You could have made stuff with this. You just burned it, and in the process of burning it, you heated up the whole planet." And
good job, guys. Good job, guys.
Go, right? But at some point we were ignorant about what we were doing, but we're not ignorant anymore. So anyway, now hopefully we'll get on board and try to do something about it. But it's going to definitely have an effect on viticulture, right? Because it's going to make places. Even Washington has become a better place to grow grapes in the last 20 years because of climate change.
In England,
you can grow champagne grapes now, and make decent champagne, right? And they're growing grapes in like Denmark and places they haven't been, and in Italy they're moving to higher elevations in the foothills of the Alps. So people are responding to it. There's this idea of the dumb farmer that, oh no, this tragedy is occurring and it's just going to wipe out all the farmers. That's the dumb farmer. The smart farmer says, oh, I'm going to move the farm up the mountain. And that's what we do, right? We respond to
pivoting.
So I don't think, there are people that just say everything's doom and gloom, but people are resilient and they respond to crises in productive ways. So I think, we'll see, we'll see changes. We'll see the Okanagan become an even better place to grow grapes up in Canada. We'll see grapes being planted more around Spokane, and we'll see the Snake River Plain in Idaho become a more viable place with less frost risk. Maybe we won't. Last year it got to 10 below zero and stayed below zero for 18 hours in Walla Walla last year.
Yeah,
maybe that won't happen as much.
We were here in the middle of
January 13th was the worst.
We had a weekend stay at the Bookwalter winery. We had Saviah that we were going to stop by. We did North Star.
It was very cold.
It wasn't as cold as Coeur d'Alene, but it was cold.
It was cold. Yeah, it was really cold.
Well, I was going to open the Syrah, and Kevin poured himself a little bit more rosé.
Oh, well, that's fine.
So
we can pour it out.
No, I don't want to do that. Let's do that because I took Shelley's.
So I've worked with the Rocky Pond folks. I wrote that AVA petition. So I don't know if you read my stuff, but
we've been on the road. Yeah.
I wrote 4. Well, I will have created 7 of the AVAs in Washington in another couple of years. I have 4 petitions that are done and 3 that are in the pipeline.
So Rocky Pond is the
Rocky Pond is in
Rocky Reach
AVA.
Yeah.
So I worked with David Dukenhorst on that.
Such a great family.
Yeah, they're really nice.
We
people.
had dinner with them. We went and spent
really nice
a day with them
at their new venue.
It's a beautiful venue.
Yeah.
And there was a handful of us, and I met Dave and his wife, and
just really nice people.
Wonderful dinner.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, my wife had stayed at their guest house there at their place. I was working there.
Yeah.
Really nice folks.
And they believe in this new AVA.
Oh, don't I know it?
Yeah. So, which is very cool, right? It's very cool that, and to your point, things change, things evolve. Sorry, you in Champagne, France, you have poo-pooed all the other sparklers in the world. Well, as Shelley said, starting to go over to England.
Yeah.
And they're starting to make some pretty good sparklers. They're going to call this London. I don't know.
No, there's some good sparkling wine coming out there. It's just in Champagne. What's that?
I'm sorry. How many AVAs are there in Washington now?
I think there's 21 or something. So.
And you're working on 2 or 3 more.
I've done 4. I did 4 of those, and 3 more are coming. The petitions have been accepted and are in review, and they just need public comment, and then they'll become official.
So
I just wrote one for the Mill Creek area.
Oh, good, good. It's exciting when we get these new AVAs. Some are sub AVAs over a larger AVA, but it's really fun. And when you talk about how things evolve with the warming of the earth, with the climate change, and you mentioned the Okanagan. Yeah, we were up there 3 weeks ago.
Oh, they got hammered this year.
Yeah, they did. Second year in a row.
Yeah.
Really 2023 wasn't as bad, but 2024
catastrophic.
Hammered. Yeah, it's many aren't going to have a 2024 vintage unless they go elsewhere.
Yeah, they're buying grapes from Washington, supposedly.
Well, and the ones up at Roche are going down to Oregon,
Yeah.
so which is good, and we're
But
going to
they'll
have a
change their
couple
label.
of those wineries on in a couple weeks. We're going to have a few of those, which is great. We loved all of the wine that we tasted up there. It was fantastic, and no one thought Canadians were making good wine. Well,
they were not several years
Yeah.
ago. I mean, that was a long time ago, but it was
They make
all
some-
like ice wine.
Yeah, they make some pretty spectacular wines in the Niagara region over, especially like Chardonnays and Pinots.
somebody's tiptoeing in.
Got the dog in.
I put the dog in. She was woofing with. This is
Yeah,
my
I
wife,
know.
Elisa.
Hi, Elisa. This is Shelley. I'm Phil.
Hi.
We're just recording a little podcast.
That's fine. Are you still using the
Chiller.
chiller?
No,
I don't need a bottle.
Since you want what's in the
Kathleen's
bottle.
on her way over. So
Okay.
let's see if we can freeze it.
That's a great idea.
That's
Yeah,
That's
these
the
are wonderful.
best
Yeah.
wine gizmo I've ever purchased, hands down.
Yeah.
You bring a white wine out on a warm day. You
Yep.
have that in the freezer, stick it over it, and you're good. It's no
Yep.
messy, no drip, no.
No muss, no fuss.
Yeah.
Love it.
We need one of those now. We don't have one of those.
No, we'll be getting one, and
Sorry about the fly.
yeah.
Pesky
Well, that
fly.
one fly.
Yeah.
It's because I haven't showered in a month. I don't know. Did you get it?
No.
Okay, Shelley. I'm gonna ask for your glass back, and I'm gonna ask you to talk briefly about this VDLA from
Me?
Dirk, Brink. Yes, you have all the notes, and
Very few.
this is a partnership. By the way, Dirk says to say hello to you.
Oh, yeah.
There was one other person that wanted me to say hello to you. I can't remember what it was, and we'll forget.
Yep.
Everybody knows you.
From,
Yeah, I keep
Eternal.
hearing that.
it was Brad Binko.
Brad Binko with
Oh, yeah.
Eternal Wine. Yep. Would you like a rinse pour or no?
No, it's fine.
Beautiful.
There's hardly nothing in there. I think it'll.
So this is a 2020 Syrah that Dirk produced when he was at Basil, one of the last vintages of Basil. Why the new owners thought it best to get rid of the winery, I don't know. But there we are.
And this was dedicated to the vineyard workers.
I'll let you look at that.
It's a cool label. I like it.
It really is. Yeah. Dedicated to the Latino vineyard workers.
Yeah.
That really are the heart and soul.
Backbone.
Exactly. You know, it's interesting. Do you know Edward Holmes? He's the basically big sales director for J. Bookwalter. And he's, he's calling Dirk a rock star. And we talked to Dirk today to kind of get a little bit more of a history for this wine because it's hard to find. We've had a couple of these bottles, very good Syrah, but he says, I don't really like being called a rock star. That feels good, but I'm only one person. There's everybody else out there that's actually involved in the creation of a bottle of wine. And so I appreciate that. Hashtag cheersing. You must forgive us. We are social media managers, so everything has to have a hashtag.
This is 100% Syrah. From Double River Vineyard.
I think
It's a little warm.
so. It's a little warm, but Syrah and is, in my opinion, and I'm a total terroir freak, the most terroir-driven grape
Right, yeah.
on the planet, more so than Pinot Noir even. And I've been in sommelier conferences where I've had hosts of sommeliers agree with me on that. I think it's the blessing and the curse of Syrah because to people like us that appreciate wines from different places and how they taste, you can taste the place. It's amazing how different Syrah can taste from place to place. But to the average American consumer that buys a Syrah in the grocery store, who wants Budweiser when they buy Budweiser, one Syrah doesn't taste like the next, and so some people get disappointed.
It's the curse of Kendall Jackson,
Yeah.
one might say, because they are
They don't
going
do
that
that.
model 100%, right? And people like Kendall Jackson, they don't want it to change.
Right.
I don't think any of those people are sitting at this table.
Right. No.
And that doesn't make them bad or
No.
us good by any
No.
stretch.
But I think it hurts Syrah as a variety
Yeah,
because Cabernet always tastes like Cabernet, and I can nail it, 100% of the time in blind tastings. But Syrah can taste crazy depending.
But that's kind
especially
of fun.
Exactly.
It's kind of fun,
It's
isn't
not
it?
more than fun. It's what makes wine
The adventure
really
is.
cool,
Yeah.
right? Is that a Syrah from Coeur tastes different from a
Yeah.
Syrah from Hermitage tastes different from a New World Syrah, an Australian Shiraz with,
Yeah.
all of them taste different from one another. And to me, that's to be celebrated.
I agree.
Not
I
to-
agree
so-
100%.
So I'm a big Syrah geek.
And why
Well,
is
that's
it
just
that
why
they
this is Syrah.
Which
why
is why
it
we
that
brought
they
this.
pick up the terroir so easily?
That is the $100,000 question, right? I don't know. I think it's largely because that the phenolics that are in a Syrah grape really change a lot through the ripening process. The percentage of there's this rotodune, which is this pepper phenolic, and there's a lot of it in Syrah. And if you pick a Syrah early, it's very peppery, and that fades over time. But it has all the other phenolics too, the green bean flavors and that. And all of these, there's a lot of them in there, and they seem like they really change in a Syrah quite dramatically over a fairly short ripening window. And so, depending on when you pick it or where it's grown, how hot it is, etc., you get a different balance of these different phenolics in the grape. So, and that's why it presents itself differently where it's grown. And the big question is, that nobody's ever successfully is answered is how do the concentrations of mineral nutrients in the soil affect the synthesis of those flavor and aroma compounds.
Yeah.
Like if you have 20% more iron, does it make 30% more of this phenolic?
It's the math
that
involved, right?
And the research hasn't been done on that enough to let us know the answers. And
But those
part of
are
me
only,
doesn't want it to be.
in a sense, but
like-
those are only two variables.
Right.
There's all the sub variables.
Right.
So if you take that and that and that, but you've got still all the sub variables that are going to skew everything. So, I mean, once you think you figured it out, then you find out something that blows you out of the water. Shelley, you have any idea what the
15.5. I knew you were gonna.
well,
Yeah, it's big.
then you can
This
taste it.
This is a very ripe Syrah. Yeah, there's no pepper in this one. This is a big, rich, ripe Syrah, sort of in the realm of like an Aussie Shiraz. It's
It's big.
and I would say 20 or 30 years ago it would have been hard to make a Syrah like this from Washington.
Interesting.
And now we can get it really ripe. We can get it really ripe.
And is that why the alcohol contents are going up in
Exactly.
Washington? Okay.
Yeah.
See? So again, with the climate change,
Yeah, it's and it's becoming a problem in some areas where the sugars are getting ahead of the phenolics, and so the sugars get so high, and that's what turns into alcohol. And so they're having to let it hang to get the phenolics right, but then the sugars are really high, and then you get too much alcohol. Then they have to run the wine through a spinning cone or reverse osmosis to extract alcohol.
Put some more water.
I mean the classic thing is to just water it down, right?
And of course, that's
But
kind
nobody
of
wants to
considered
really-
taboo in the
Yeah,
wine
yeah,
industry. But why? I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
It's nice to say we haven't done anything yet. Well, this is 15.5. And I think because it's a little warmer.
This doesn't taste super hot to me as a wine.
Well,
I think
I'm
it's-
having
Wait a
trouble
minute,
with
it's just
this
warm.
because of that, because of the temperature.
Yeah, it's
It's
not at drinking temperature. It's a little warm.
Yep, it is. But the nuances are still coming through.
Yeah. It's a well-crafted wine. I think it's definitely better than average Washington Syrah in my book.
That's good.
Well, Dirk
He'll
was.
appreciate that.
Yeah, he will. Dirk was with Basil, then over to Yellow Hawk. He did some work at Coeur d'Alene Cellars, Shelley.
Oh,
I didn't
really?
know that.
And now he's at Dumas Cellars. Dumas,
Oh, really?
Dumas Cellars, yeah. And it was John Bookwalter that called him up and said, I've had some of this stuff. This when Basil went away, Dirk bought this because he felt like it had some staying power. And John said, look, let's put this out there. You can use our facility. And so they created the label and all of that. How many?
View of the blues, I think. Well, Azules is blue, but
It's
I don't know
blue,
what they're
yeah.
talking about. Is there a lake around there?
Vista, Blue Vista.
Yeah.
Yeah. It must be just looking at the sky or something. There's
Oh, maybe.
many big lakes. Double River. If it's in Walla Walla Valley, we don't have any. We don't have any lakes.
No,
Must be the blue sky.
it must be. Because I remember going to that place and it was like a good view of the sky.
Well, that was also very cold. It was hard to see the sky
No,
sideways.
not then. Way
okay.
back. Way back.
Okay. Oh yeah, Basil. Gosh, I really like that property a lot. We had such a good time there. I want to just mention real quick, Shelley, the social web wine word of the week, Terra, not terroir, Terra.
Mm-hmm.
I've got down in wine tasting and description, Terra denotes the presence of earthy, soil-like or mineral flavors and aromas in a wine, which can include notes of soil, clay, stone, mineral, earthy mushroom, as opposed to the non-earthy mushroom. Who knew? And forest floor.
Non-earthy mushroom.
I always try to find a wine word that coincides with our guest.
Mm-hmm.
So dirt.
So dirt, and I
Moving
think.
on the wind. Her place was called Terra.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Would you add anything to this word?
Yeah, I mean, mineral. You threw mineral in there, and I taught a terroir class at Whitman College for 15 years, and I have almost an entire lecture devoted to deconstructing the use of the word minerality in wine.
Oh, yeah.
Which is one of the most ridiculous terms in wine. Because you can't taste minerals, quartz has no taste, feldspar has no taste, mica has no taste. Those
What
are
about
minerals. Granite is a rock made of minerals, and granite doesn't have a taste. If you lick basalt, it has no taste. If you only like rock salt has taste, right? Slate. So I think the term is largely used to describe a flavor in wine that you can't ascribe to something organic. You can't, it's not a fruit. It's not a thing. So if you just can't think of a term in your head that
it's very mineral-y.
You just say it's minerally. And in my experience, people most commonly use the term minerality in wine when it's the wine has a lot of acidity and it's not very ripe and it doesn't have a lot of fruit flavors, and people will sometimes say, it's sharp, it's like a mineral. Well, that's a textural thing, right? You can't taste, the sharpness of a crystal, right, as much as you like to say. So, or it's flinty, right, which is sort of a way of saying it's cutting or it's sharp in your mouth.
Graphite-y.
So I think minerality is one of the most, used terms in wine speak. And because the fact is that most minerals have no flavor. Real minerals like quartz, feldspar, mica, calcite, the things that most rocks are made of. The only minerals that have flavor are rock salt. And so I think it's a catch-all term for
Interesting.
An inorganic flavor in a wine.
Mineral, so
What's that?
Animal, vegetable, or mineral. So it's not an animal and not a vegetable.
Exactly. It's a mineral. Right.
And you do have profiles in like Burgundy or something where you get that barnyard type bringing the animal in.
Yeah, the
right?
funkiness.
The
Yeah,
funk, or as Gary Vaynerchuk would say, sheep butt. Yeah. I don't know how Gary knows that and put his nose up. I mean, I'm not saying, I'm just saying. So some wines we've had this week: Longford Estate Chardonnay, Ponderay Chardonnay, speaking of, Decibel Rose, Seleccio, Lucendo, Linze Tinto, Velascol, and Milbrand Chardonnay. I can say Milbrand. I wanted to also touch on coming up we're the 23rd. So the 28th is National Red Wine Day. 29th is International Cabernet Sauvignon Day. September, I have to say it, Shelley, we're close to September now. National Chianti Day. Chianti.
That must mean Lambrusco Day is coming up soon.
No, we had Lambrusco Day already. I'm sorry. We can make any day Lambrusco Day if you'd like. Shelley, do you have any last questions? Because we are running out of time.
We are running out
for
of time,
Kevin.
I don't have any more at the moment. We want to honor your time.
Well, I will say this then. Thank you very much.
Oh,
this
certainly.
is such a treat, and I know that you're probably pulled in numerous different directions, and I really appreciate you saying yes to us. This helps get the science and geography down so that lay people have an idea of what's behind a lot of the wines in Washington. You did ask at some point, did it go down as far as Idaho, like Julietta area, things like that?
Yeah.
It did, actually. I worked with the Rivaura winery. I was
Another
their
sponsor of ours.
initial contact, actually, and
Oh.
worked with them on getting that entire project up and running. And they're
Nice.
amazing people, and the wines have turned out great. And my good friend, Bill O'Nervain, is their winemaker, who's a master of wine. And
You got the kids in there too, Lane and Vince, right?
oh, they're fantastic. What a great family.
Yes.
And what a beautiful site and great terroir. And it's one of the projects I've worked on that I'm most proud of, because I think they've realized the potential of that site.
Well, they got hit hard. They
Yeah,
probably lost 70%
Um,
of their crop.
and then they just fought off a big fire. They
no.
were standing at the margins of their vineyards with hoses, and they fought off the fire, while the vineyard up the road and the whole winery went up in flames and went down. But they
my
saved their vineyard and their winery.
Well, if you're going to
farm.
have a crop that's not going to do anything because of the freezes,
Well, you don't want to
you don't want them burned up, but there's not going to be any smoke taints, so
Right.
you don't have
Right.
to worry about that. But you want to save those vines.
there's that. I
It's
think
not there
I
either.
think that those
No.
I think those are the finest wines made in Idaho.
I
you-
think so too.
You
and-
are spot on.
And
All estate.
and when
wines.
I went there the first day, when nothing was planted, when they called me up and said, "Will you come look at this and tell us what you think?"
They have
I
talked
walked-
about you before.
Yeah, I walked up and I said, "Oh my God, this is an amazing site. Yes, you should plant it. You will make the best wines in Idaho."
They are making amazing
Yeah,
wines.
and I said, "There's going to be this time period where everybody down in Nampa Caldwell is going to go, what the hell?"
Or Napa, Sonoma.
Yeah, it's fantastic. They have great terroir, and so yes, to your question, the floods backed up the Clearwater Valley above Kamaya or whatever, and so when I dug pits and was evaluating their soil profiles, there were Missoula flood sediments in their vineyards down low. Yeah, so yeah, it back flooded up into the Hell's Canyon. Back flooded up into the Clearwater. When I say back flooded, I mean the water came down into Washington, came down, hit the Wallula Gap, and then backed up the Snake River and the Yakima rivers, back flooded. So the water was actually rushing upstream up into the
Has to go
Hell's
somewhere.
Canyon. Yeah, it has to go
Has to
somewhere.
go somewhere.
And rushed up the Clearwater. So the only places that were affected in Idaho, the Missoula, by the flooding really, was the Clearwater and Snake River drainages down around Lewiston.
Okay.
So
You've got such a fun gig. I'm just saying, yeah, it's taken you for many years to get this expertise, but my
Wisdom.
goodness, it's got to be fun to do. Super fun. Well, I'm going to tell you thank you very much.
Sure.
Yes.
Again.
Yeah.
Next
absolutely.
week we have the Cochrans and wines from Finger Lakes.
Really? Are you going to go to New York?
No, they came to us.
Wow.
But we are working on the Finger Lakes Wine Alliance to get us there in spring. I think we're shooting for.
They're going to talk to you about thermal mass of deep lakes and how it moderates their climate and allows them to grow grape Riesling. Yeah.
I mean, and I actually don't know the 3 bottles we have. One is a rosé, I think. The other 2, I don't know.
We didn't open the
I opened it, but I laid them down. Our friends Chris and Heidi Cochran were there, and we're going to have them on as guests.
Have some Missouri wine.
We're going to have some Missouri wine a week after that.
First AVA in the United States.
Thank you. It is
That's
true.
Why we're having them
That's
on.
why we're having them on, because once Prohibition came around, they were like kaput, right? And they're making wines out of grapes that are like the original grapes of US.
Mostly they're hybrids now, right? Norton and grapes like that. I think Norton is their big grape now, but Chambourcin and these hybrid grapes. I just wrote a petition for the first AVA in Kansas, so
wow.
I did my homework. They hired me. I have actually a whole PowerPoint and presentation on how to write an AVA and make it successful, and so I presented that to the Kansas Agricultural Board, and they hired me to write an AVA for Kansas.
Oh, good.
As part, and they wanted to get on board, right? Because Missouri had one, Iowa was part of one, and they didn't have an AVA, so they have one.
However,
and they grow 100% hybrids there. Right? It's all
Interesting.
Chambourcin and Norton and Maréchal Foch and these grapes that most people haven't heard of.
Well, every
But they
state
can survive. Some people here wish they were growing those grapes this winter because they would have survived the freeze.
we can create wine in every state in the United States. Some of it's not good wine.
One of my students for my terroir class wrote the first AVA petition for Hawaii.
Is that right?
On
That
Maui.
will be really interesting, wouldn't it?
So there's a lot of people make pineapple wine over there, but the thing is, right, there's snow on top of the highest peaks in Hawaii, right?
Sure.
So if you go up far enough up on the slope, you can get into a moderate temperate climate, right? And they found that on Haleakala on Maui, and they planted vinifera.
Wow.
And my student worked as a winemaker there, and then I consulted with him and helped him write a petition for that AVA.
Man, we could talk about this forever, but we need to make sure that you
Yeah.
are under control here. Remember, with a little bit of knowledge, Shelley, wine becomes a lot less overwhelming. That is it. We are ready to go. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you again, Kevin.
Thank you.
See you next week with Cochrans. Thank you for spending part of your day to wind down with Shelley and Phil. Remember, you can listen to any episode of the Wine Time Fridays podcast by visiting winetimefridays.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And join us on our Wine Time Fridays Facebook page, Instagram, or on Twitter, which is @VintageTweets, for daily conversation. Until next week, here's our toast to you. To health, wealth, abundance, gratitude, peace on earth, and of course, romance.